myself I can make it on my own. Making it alone is lonely. Twisting and I'm turning, I'm crashing and I'm burning. So reach out your hand to me. Come down, please rescue my heart. I'll drown without you.
Good to see you guys. We got a special day planned, and so I kind of just want to jump into this and kind of set it up. But just before I do, I wanted to celebrate. We have this class called the Journey class. It's a 4-week deal, and it's been incredible. We've had just an awesome group of people. This is the last week, so this is your last week for the Journey class. I'm glad you guys are going to be there. We're going to be really discussing your strengths and how God has designed you uniquely to love and serve other people. And it's going to be kind of a really fun day. But we had a person give their lives to Christ on the second week of this. And guys, we just love seeing people find faith, belong before they believe. And sometimes there's like a long season of belonging. But when people reach that point where they're ready to put their faith in God and to believe, we just celebrate that. So just so grateful and so happy for my friend who gave her life to Christ just a few weeks ago. And I love being a part of that here at Whitewater. Today we're going to be capping off our series that we've been going through. It's basically, the series has been, Better Together. And as you watch that video, it kind of shows the happiness and joy of like the honeymoon stage of a relationship, and how over a period of time with a lot of different, who knows, but a lot of pressures that life brings, internal and external, all of a sudden by the end, they're facing the other way on the same bed, but they couldn't be more divided. And when we've been looking at how's the Bible, what does the Bible teach? What does Jesus teach that keeps us from getting from here to there, so that we're separating maybe what God has actually tried to bring or actually brought together? And the journey has kind of taken these 3 turns, and just want to remind us of what they were. The first week, we really had this challenge for the whole church. If you're willing to take this love challenge, and this is for people who are single, people who are moving toward dating or engagement, or they're married, or maybe someone who's coming out of or going into divorce and going through some hard times there. This series really has been for you. And one of the things we challenged everybody to do is, if you have a significant other, or if you someday will have a significant other, a spouse someday, or a fiance someday, or currently have them, to tell them how much you love them and how committed you are to them. We live in a culture that's so afraid of commitment, afraid to share that. And we just said, hey, I talk with a lot of couples when I'm doing counseling, and there's sometimes these blockages where they don't even communicate emotionally what they feel. And so I often give this challenge to them, and I gave this to our church. If this was your last week on earth with that person, if this was your last week, what would they have to know? What would they have to know? And I don't know if you did that, but if you haven't, no one's keeping you back from it. Share what's on your heart and share how committed you are to them. I remember reading through the vows that Sarah and I made to each other that week. It was pretty, I don't know, for me it was a really powerful reminder. And the other thing, the next week we talked about this reality. A lot of couples don't pray together. They don't even establish, when they start dating, they don't establish habits of prayer, bringing God right to the middle of their relationship. And what happens when we pray is we're opening our hearts to one another. There's all the busyness and all the pressures and the stresses of life, and we can get focused on those things and all the irritants of the person. But if we settle down for a moment and we actually go heart to heart and pray, all of a sudden your wife's heart, your husband's heart, your fiance's heart, the person you love, you get to know their heart better than you ever could have. And so I just encourage us that week, sit down and take time to pray. I had a person in our series, we were hoping it would really help people, and I was talking to a friend, and they're like, oh yeah, last week I left, really crying, and I was like, oh dang, oh man, was I that bad? They were like, yes, you were. And they said, it was really hard, and I never prayed with my husband before, and I ended up going home, and it was just kind of a sore area, but I asked him if we could pray together, and he said, yeah. And it turned from like one of the like hardest days into one of the really coolest moments. And if we engage these things, it takes boldness, it takes courage. And even if you're single right now, like to begin having a prayer life and begin knowing what you want in someone to have a prayer life with. So important. And when you pray together, you can move to areas of fearless feedback where you're actually communicating well, and then also fearless forgiveness, which when you're in a relationship sometimes has to happen. Forgiveness once in a while. And then the last thing last week we did was we talked about this. Do you guys remember the emotional piggy bank? You guys remember this? We had my daughter's piggy bank. It's her college fund, and she has this little big kind of chubby pig. And we talked about this reality that many of us have this emotional bank account that we're totally unaware of because we have like really low emotional intelligence. And when we're called to serve one another, as it says in Ephesians 5, that we're supposed to mutually serve and submit and honor and respect the other person and build habits of serving, that we learn to turn toward each other emotionally rather than away from each other. It can be little things like the husband saying, hey, look, there's a robin in the backyard. That robin's been here the last 3 weeks. How amazing is that? And if you don't care about robins at all, it could really be easy to just be like, yeah, and go back to your crossword puzzle or your I don't know, maybe you're Googling something, whatever you're doing, and not pay attention. But that moment, you're turning away from them, even in the small things. And we're learning that to have emotional intelligence and have a healthy marriage is to turn toward the other. Even if you have no interest in robins or no interest in football or no interest in, whatever that your person you love is interested in, you learn to be interested in what they have because you want to be emotionally intelligent in how you serve them. We also talked about these 5 love languages, physical touch, spending time together, words of encouragement. We talked about just these different ways that people receive love. And I would really encourage, if you've never taken a test or you don't know what your love language, it's so helpful. All of our community groups right now are going through this, and they're taking a free test to tell you what your love language is, and it helps you understand your wife or husband, helps you understand how to serve other people better. Isn't that good? And that when we know how to do that, it's like money in the bank. And you're actually building an account where, like, when you go through hard times, like, oh man, we went through a hard time, but we had the emotional currency to handle it. Rather than most people are running on fumes and the emotional bank account is on empty or it's negative. They're writing checks that are going to bounce emotionally. And so when hardship hits that, it's much easier to fracture and divide a marriage or a relationship. So we just encouraged you to serve one another last week. This week, here's the challenge. Have fun together. We want you to go on a date together. If you're single here and you're like, oh, I don't have a date, get a date this week. There's someone here. Just be like, hey, do you have a date? No, I don't have a date. Well, now you do. So you'll be good. Unless they've been following you around, then don't do that. But I just want to encourage you guys to have some fun this week, to go on a date, to rekindle, laugh, and have an enjoyable time together. That's been really important for me and my wife. I want to actually move into today's. It's not actually a sermon. It's not a talk. It's more of a conversation. And we've never really done this before. This isn't normal for us. If this is your first week, you kind of are here on a different day, but I hope this is a blessing to you. What we're going to do is we're going to be taking some of the key questions that were sent in over our sermon series on Better Together, questions that are from you guys. And I'm actually going to have my wife, Sarah, if you guys want to give her a hand as she comes up. This is Sarah. Yep. She's the pretty one. And we got a few more.
Her face turns red easily, guys.
Yeah, her face turns very red. So we're gonna answer some questions that have been given to our church and that our church is going through. And I would just hope that this would be a blessing to you. And Sarah wanted to make sure I mentioned this as kind of a reality clause. We do not have a perfect marriage, and we do not want to be holding this up as like a picture of a perfect marriage. We want to be holding up a picture of a very vulnerable, real marriage, and as people who are trying to follow the Lord, trying to survive life. We have a little girl named Novella who's 3 years old. We're trying to figure out being parents. We're trying to figure out a lot, and so we just want to say this. We want to submit these things with humility to you, and say, hey, if you can learn anything from us, and from our mistakes or from things that God has kind of helped us with, here you go. And if it's helpful, I would pray that it would bless your life. If it's horrible advice, then you can just drop it on the floor and walk out of here and be like, what was that? And you can forget it. But that we wanted to make sure you know that, and that's how we feel about it. So, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind, would you just open us with a word of prayer?
Lord, I thank you for this church family. I thank you for how they've supported us and how they've been an encouragement and model for us as well. And I pray that you meet each person where they're at this morning, whether they're in a relationship, out of a relationship. I thank you that you bring wisdom and comfort and peace and even joy in whatever season we're in. And so I just pray that you bless the questions and our responses. I pray that you provide wisdom. And I pray that you would really, wherever we're at, you move us forward to where you want us to be. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right. Again, if you have questions, if something something hits your mind, and you're like, oh, we should ask this, just text it up to that number, and we'll try to take time for it today. So let's jump in, Sarah. Here's a good question. I thought this was a good starting point. What's your story of getting together? Your first date, how did it all go together? I assume they've heard me talk a bunch, so I bet that's more addressed to you. What do you think? How did we get together?
So George and I met later in life. We were actually kind of set up. I was investing in I'm a high school teacher, so I was investing in some gals, and they're like, Miss Nemi, we have a new youth pastor, and he's single. I was like, you guys are high schoolers. I don't know about that. At that point in time in my life, a lot of staff members were trying to set me up with their brother or their son or their friend, and it got a little weird after a while. So I was like, I'm not being set up with anyone.
And I had these high school kids in my youth group. They came up to me and they're like, hey, Pastor Bedlian, someone called me that. They're like, there's this amazing girl. She's blonde haired. You have to meet her. And one of them knew I was from Bellingham, so they're like, yeah, she wears hiking boots. And that's hot. So they knew me really well.
But then there was another new staff member. We started at the same time, and he's like, hey, I have a friend who recently moved from Bellingham. We went to college together, and for some reason I think you guys should meet. And this guy's kind of quiet. He doesn't seem like the setup kind of guy. And I said, well, tell me about him, because I don't really want to go on a blind date. And he started talking about George, and I was like, I think that's the same guy as these girls are talking about. And by the way, Taylor, the children's director, she was one of those girls. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I think they're the same guy. He is the same guy.
Some of the singles out there are like, where is she? Can she set me up, please? Where is she?
And so I found out he was a pastor. So I was like, at least it's safe, right? And so I ended up, we ended up going to Starbucks, because you can get away very quickly, right? You could have coffee for 10 minutes or 2 hours.
She said she got it extra hot in case she needed a weapon.
So we ended up going to Starbucks and ended up talking for probably close to 2 hours. And then he called me the next day, which was nice of him. And I think the first date we went on ended up being going to Westport to go surfing. Who goes to Westport on their first date in his wetsuit with some strange guy? I did. I don't know if that was the most wise decision, but he was trustworthy, and it worked out.
I wasn't holding you under the water or anything like that. It was good. It was one of the moments for me where I just realized how awesome she was. We were wearing wetsuits, and they were kind of not perfectly sized, because my family owns these used wetsuits that are one size fits all, kind of. So we were in these things, and it was cold. It was headed toward the fall, so it was kind of a little bit after surf season. And she had a board, and she learned how to surf. Got up after the first few tries, and it was so fun. And there was a moment where the sun was out, it was cold, and it just hit her hair perfect. Her hair was just white blonde. She looked over at me, and she laughed, and this big snot thing came.
It's like saline solution when you go surfing.
It just came right out of her nose. She's like, oh, whoops. And just thanks for taking me. And it was just, I was hooked. I was like, this is the one. It's true. It's totally true.
How true. I don't know if it really was the one out.
Oh, yeah. But when did, one of the other add-ons to this question was, when did you know that he was an incredible and muscular catch? I'm might have embellished some of that question.
It was a wetsuit. No.
Yeah.
I'm much more of a cautious person. I've been someone that always steps back and analyzes before I decide to do anything. And so, George, I think, bought a ring after a month of dating, and I was more like, I don't know who this guy is. I gotta, see who he's like over a period of time. And so, I think it was the times that I was away. I went to go visit my parents for a couple weeks over the summer, and I really missed him. And I think that was like the first kind of like, oh, I think I do love him. And then he got knee surgery one day, and
Just randomly
one day he needed surgery.
I just feel like some surgery on my knee. It's not better.
Whatever, it's not like he's going to die or anything, but I think when you're in the hospital, you think, wow, what would my life be without George? And so I think I realized, wow, I love this guy, and I think the kicker was when we broke up, because we didn't get engaged, and I was like, wow, I do really want to marry him, but we broke up.
Yeah.
So, but now we're married.
Yeah, I played it up a little bit with the surgery. I was like, oh, Sarah, it hurts, and I might die. And it reeled her in a little bit.
Yeah.
But, that was big.
Yeah.
And
I think it's hard in our society, especially you get a little older and people think that you should be married, and there's expectations. And I think that there's some loneliness that comes in, and I had friends that got married, and I was in all their weddings from college, and so 8 weddings later, 8 bridesmaids dresses later, I'm like, oh, I do really want to get married. And I almost felt like I had to get new friends because my friends were married. Like, you can't hang out with your married friends. That's a lie, guys. I hope that you guys hang out. We hope to hang out. If you're single, we love to hang out with you, and hope that community group, that's the case. But I think that it's important to not be too, you have to have standards, right? Can't be too picky, but also not overanalyze. And
how many of you guys are analyzers? Like, you like to analyze situation, weigh it out, pluses, minuses. You got your T graph thing going. I don't even know if I said it right. You're like, an analyst would know that I said that wrong. How many of you guys are gut people? You're like, you just go with your gut. You just like, this is what I'm doing. I love and respect you guys because I'm very similar. But Sarah's really helped me with that. It's been a good merging. But when you're in relationships in our culture, there's so much fear involved of commitment, taking the next step. How many of you guys have noticed that? There's this, you're saying bye to your independence. There could be something better. There's all these things that can be haunting people that keep them from moving forward. And I just want to encourage you with your relationships, and especially moving from singleness into dating, and then toward marriage, is to love the other and to be bold. And you need to be wise. Yeah, of course, you need to be wise and run, people by your friends and have your grid and all that stuff. But when it's time to pull the trigger, don't just sit there frozen forever. And that's our cultural thing. They're frozen. I've had so many couples that are just they're ready for it. They're so excited for it. They both want it. When you talk to them privately, they're like, I can't. When's he going to ask? Or when's she going to ask me to ask her? All this buildup, and then there's this tension. Then they never step past that point. I'll ask them well, how long have you guys been together? How long has it been like this that you're just afraid to be married? And they're like, well, we're just afraid it's not going to work out, or my family had bad experiences with divorce, and there's all these reasons, and it's just a piece of paper, blah blah blah. Well, how long have you guys been together? Oh, about 8 years. What? You're functionally married. What are you talking about? Well, yeah. Why are you afraid to pull the trigger? And I just want to encourage you to have courage. And it's time to go for it. That's all I'll say about that. We got other things to hit. Anything else that you'd say about singleness in general?
I think sometimes, at least this is how I was, sometimes, the singleness, it's oh, I want to be married. And I think if I stayed in that spot and just waited for someone, I think that it leads to disappointment. And I think the times where I was the most happy was when I just had vision for my future, and I plugged into a church. I served there a lot. I invested in high school students. You have more money. Well, kind of. You don't have more financial tie downs like a mortgage and car and school and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I really admire some of my friends who didn't wait. They're in different countries now, and they're still not married, but they've pursued their vision and haven't been like in a pity party about it. And I think sometimes I got stuck there, and instead it was just like, no, I need to move forward and enjoy the life that I have. There's some real benefits to both parts of life, and to be thankful for where we're at, and trust God for the vision for your future.
Yeah, waiting around rather than embracing what God has for you in the season you're in, especially if you're single or you're dating different people. I think don't sideline what God is doing. It's so easy to do that in our culture. And so many people will be like, well, I'll put my faith aside for a few years. I'll find someone, get married, and then I'll re-engage later. Because that's just what you have to do in our culture. If you're going to find someone and you're going to, be attractive to someone, blah, 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 then I'm going to have to put my faith on the sideline. And the thing that attracted me to Sarah was like she didn't need me. Like as nice as that is to be like, oh, they need you. But she was independent. She was following the Lord. She was serving people. She was Taylor, the gal who runs our children's. Sarah was discipling her when she was in high school. No one was asking Sarah to do that. She wasn't doing it for church. She just wanted to help some girls grow in their faith. And she had a job. She was contributing to society. She had a mission. And to me, that was really attractive, that she wasn't waiting around for someone to define her life. She was following God's calling. And I would encourage those of you who are in that season right now to take that approach, because God can just use you in incredible ways. And when you're content with Him, that's usually if there's going to be a change and God's going to bring someone in your life, that's the best season, when you're content with Him, for Him to bring someone to you. Make sense? So let's jump to some of the questions that we've gotten from people. I think we've actually even got a few on the phone. Oh yeah, we do. So here's the first one, Sarah. What are practical ways to grow together when you are spiritually, emotionally, and physically exhausted? I thought that was a great question. What are some of your thoughts?
I think it's hard. I think once you get married, you have a lot of commitments in different areas, and sometimes you can just be drained. And so I think George's phrase is you're too busy not to pray. And so when you're, crazy busy, even taking 5 minutes to pray with your spouse, kind of like we were talking about, or pray on your own, or even when you don't know what to do spiritually, sometimes you're just mad or sad or whatnot. I found a couple devotions. It's day by day, so you just flip to that day and read that, and that usually is like, wow, I really needed to hear that. And it might just be 5 minutes, but I think there's real truth to when you seek God first, the other things fall into place. And so seeking that first, and then figuring out what the priorities are in your life. I think sometimes we live in a society that says you have to do all these things to be happy. And so picking those key priorities, and you might even have to say no to some areas. This year, I've had a lot of health issues the last 3 years, and then this last year, I've had 3 miscarriages, and it's kind of taken me out of the game in some ways, just for more physical reasons. But knowing that, I think when we feel called, and we feel like we have a vision for our lives, we're excited about it instead of drained. And so knowing what you're called to do, or what your vision for your life, or what makes you come alive.
Yeah. This is a big thing that I've learned, so I'll read this. It's kind of an ancient scripture from Ecclesiastes, and it says, "For everything there is a season." And I just think that there's such wisdom when you're emotionally, spiritually, physically exhausted. How many of you guys have ever been there? Oh, you all are liars. You guys are liars. That's okay. Liars are supposed to be in church, so that's cool. Seasons, man. We have to recognize the seasons we're in. Here, let me just read this, and I'll say why it's important, and then we'll go to the next question. "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to harvest, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to cry, a time to laugh, a time to grieve, and a time to dance." I mean, This is life. This is a guy who's looking at a full life and looking at all the seasons that go in and out of a life. And if we don't recognize that, if we have this pressure like we have to do everything and be everything to all people, and we have to have, there's this like, what I've been learning recently is that we have like this myth of perfect balance. That we're supposed to have perfectly balanced lives, that we perfectly do church, and we perfectly do family, and we perfectly parent, and we perfectly do our hobbies, and we perfectly work our jobs, and we perfectly go to sleep the exact amount of time you're supposed to. We have this pressure on us to be like in this perfect balance all the time. And the problem is that we're not in balance, and I'm in balance. Have you guys felt that pressure before? But here's the problem. Life doesn't work in this perfect balance thing. That's like a synthetic, made-up thing. It's a myth. The reality, what the Bible teaches us, I think, for health isn't just perfect balance. It's teaching us seasons. That there's seasons where like we actually might have to focus on our family. There's seasons where it's time to get up and go and love our neighbors. There's seasons that are more clearly, like it's a new job. How many of you guys have gone through the new season of marriage? How many of you guys have done that? Marriage. If you guys have had the new season of children, put your hands up. That's a totally different rhythm than before. And here's the deal. When you can recognize what season you are in, what season you are headed out of, what season you are headed into, you can release expectations that are unhealthy for you to hold on to. When we had Novella and I was going to graduate school and I was planting a church and we have a pretty new marriage, just a few years old, it was foolish of me to have the expectation that I needed to continue working out and I needed to spend time, spending time on a lot of those health things and things I'd done, sports, and doing a lot of that stuff. I had to release expectations in that season there. I had to release some other expectations of having like the perfect house and having like the perfect lawn. And how many of you guys have pressure there? Some people like, that's a big deal. And what do you mean, George? There's certain things you have to learn to let go of, because if I'm saying yes to the lawn and to perfect health and working out, I'm saying no to my little girl. That is the season God has me. I will never get that back. And so many of us, like, we're trying to be balanced and be perfect, and we're missing out with the season God has right in front of our face. There'll be a day when you are empty nesters and you would give anything to have your little girl or little boy just for a few moments to play with. We have to embrace the seasons when we can give up those expectations and we can seize the opportunities of the season that we are in. There's a season for everything. And that's something that's important. Only you can know that and identify that. Are you going to be willing and able to cut out and let go of the expectations that are unhealthy for you in that season? The next question, you have anything to add, or is that okay? Next question. Actually, we had one on the phone. Let's do the phone. Did I do that right? Oh, 1 second. Boom. Here we go. Sarah, I assume that you were integral in getting George to trim his beard. Thank you. That's not even a question, dude. What? How dare you, sir? How do you deal with bickering over little issues? What is the silliest thing you've ever fought over, especially with George?
Is that really a question?
Yeah, how do we deal with bickering? We don't bicker.
Never.
Ever.
Never.
No.
The cell phone charger, seriously, is the biggest deal.
Feel disrespected.
I don't know why I get so angry about the cell phone charger. If you have extra cell phone chargers, donate them this way. I think I bought like 5. I don't even know what happens to them.
It's Novella. She loses them. It's not me. I promise. There's always that thing, right? There's the controller. There's the phone charger, or there's the whatever it is for you guys. And I think it kind of represents a little bit of a power struggle in the marriage, like who has control over it. Are we the only ones?
Yeah.
All the men were just like slowly going like this. And so Josh was like, "Don't say anything, don't move." She was watching you. Don't. That was wise, Josh. Good job. How do we kind of work through those little things when they come through?
I think George always has this phrase that don't make anything bigger than the relationship. I think sometimes when you get in those arguments, blame is cast very easily, and then you become enemies. Not true enemies, but that you assume that they have negative motives rather than just assuming that they have the best and that it was just probably not thinking about it. That it's really not a priority to some. You have different priorities of what expectations look like.
Yeah. So what it looks like, where's the cell phone charger? I don't know. Where'd you put it? I didn't put it anywhere. You put it somewhere. This is what it looks like. And I'm like, maybe Novella took it. You know that's not true. Quit smiling. I'm so mad right now. You do not smile. This is serious.
George is a smiler. I'm the angry one.
And then finally it's like, well, you can't keep track of anything. Well, hold on there. All of a sudden it's getting deeper. Well, we need to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this right now. Well, I want to. Well, let's talk about it because you've lost this, this, and this. I don't want to talk about this now. And eventually, sometimes if it gets real heated, I'll be like, I need to walk away. And it's okay. You got to kind of cool down a little bit. We'll come back later, and then it's not a big deal because I found where I lost the charger. But that's the little stuff, right? But then it'll remind us, oh, I love you. Why was I so mad about this? And then
it's just a cell phone charger. We don't even need cell phones sometimes.
Yeah.
It's more of a distraction.
I'll be like, can I have a hug? And we'll go to embrace, and I'll go to kiss her, and then she'll be looking in the backyard.
Mow the lawn.
Can you please mow the lawn? Just for sake of time, we got to keep moving on. Hopefully that was a little bit of the inside. We're very normal, like anybody. I'm in a current relationship with a girl. We met online. Things have been great up to about 4 months ago. She's a Catholic and not really open to coming to church with me. So my question is there a church that is the best of both worlds, or does that not exist? Thank you. I'll just jump in on this one real quick. Whenever you have someone who has different beliefs than you, it can be a challenge, right? Different core values. And so that shows up. And personality-wise, we can get along, but then if our core convictions, the world that we stand on, our gravity is totally different, that makes a challenge. How many of you guys have dated or been with someone or are with someone who has totally different values than you? Family with totally different values. It's very common in our culture. And I want to say a few things about that. In this situation, if maybe this is your story, maybe you could replace the Catholic with something different, but maybe this is your story. I would say first and foremost, have you actually talked about what Catholicism is? What your beliefs are, what their beliefs are. Because so many times we're like, oh, that's a different thing. They must believe something totally different. But have you discussed where the common ground is? So many times we want to jump about to the things that are different, to what we disagree on, what's not the same, before we actually talk about what is the same. What do we agree on? And I recently was talking with a friend, a pastor as well, who's dealing with the same thing. This husband's a Catholic and the wife's Protestant, and they believe this and we do this and we do it differently. And when they started talking, they had never talked about what they actually believed. Well, what do you believe about in Catholicism? What do you believe in? Well, let me go talk to my priest real quick and I'll come back. They didn't know. They just knew we're different and I don't want to give up what I have because we're different. What's the same? So they come back and they're like, well, we really believe that, Jesus is the center of everything and the Bible's really important for everything and has everything to do with how we live our lives and helps us. They started going through this stuff and they're like, the wife was like, I believe that too. And he was like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I think I'm thinking what you're thinking. We can be together. This marriage can work. And so they started with where they had common ground. And then, yeah, sure, there were some differences. And eventually, over time, they began working through that because it's a relationship. And nothing should be bigger than the relationship. And I think that's really important. Now, if you're dating someone, they believe something totally different. We talked about this a few weeks ago. In 1 Corinthians, I believe in chapter 7, verse 12, it it says this: if a brother has a wife who is not a believer and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. So if you're already committed and you're in a relationship, a marriage relationship, a covenant relationship, it says don't divorce. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to stay with her, she must not divorce him, for the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, or he's being blessed through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. So you're blessing the other. And it basically just goes on to say, look, for the sake of your family and for the sake of that person, to show the covenant love, the kind of faithful love that God has, love them faithfully, love them into the kingdom, love them and pray that God will soften and change their heart. But if you're not married and you have totally different beliefs, I would really encourage you to find out what those beliefs are, and if they don't match up over time, it could lead to a lot of hurt. And you're going to have to know if that is worth it. And the Bible teaches us, ultimately, if this person is never going to change, and that's not in the cards for them, to not hitch yourself to someone, or yoke yourself to someone who isn't a believer. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, but I thought it was worth mentioning, and that's the scripture, if you want to look at it. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 7. It's real powerful scripture. So start with what's common first and then move out from there. And do you know what the other believes? I think we have time for just a few more questions. Where are we at? Here we are. This is a tough question. Let's just go here for a moment. What if your best friend, because we talked about being best friends with your husband or wife, or becoming best friends with someone who's going to be your spouse. It says, but what if your best friend is already taken because they're married? That's a deep question. Sarah? No, just kidding. I'd love it if you jump in too, but that's a deep question. What if the person that you love, that you want to be with, you feel most connected to, is getting married or has gotten married? That's a tough one, right? I think if we look at statistics, there is a lot of marriages that have suffered with infidelity and with people crossing the boundaries that have been set by marriage and the commitments that they made to this person because the grass is greener, or there's a lot of stress, or there was just this long buildup of all these things and we just drifted apart. And so all of a sudden I have this reason to leave. And it could be a reason like this. Well, my best friend is that person, and they're with that person, but I know that they're not as good of friends. And so it'd be really easy to start justifying because, hey, for the sake of friendship, and I want the best for this person, and I know better, to begin to start an unhealthy relationship. So I would first of all say this: if two lives have been pledged to each other before God and man, and you want to be friends, best friends, or are best friends, consider yourself with someone in the guy or the gal in that relationship. That marriage has determined that God is saying to you, that is not your best friend anymore. It doesn't mean that they're not a friend, that you don't love them and can't care for them, pray for them, but you cannot have a marital relationship with someone who is married. That's the boundary line being drawn. If it were you and you were married and someone said, you know what, I could be a better friend than you are to your husband or wife. So it justifies me stepping into that and dividing what God has made one. God has taken two hearts and made them one. If someone looked at your marriage in the future and said, hey, well, I could be better friends and we're going to be better friends than you are, so that justifies me to divide your marriage? No. No. That is a clear sign that is God saying, you can't, that is a boundary. You can't be best friends the way you were. Does that make sense? That's hard. And here's with a lot of cheating and a lot of infidelity starts. It starts with like unwise decisions. I think it was Andy Stanley who coined that. This reality that it doesn't often start like, oh, I like look at that person, they're cute, and then boom, you're wrapped in infidelity and there's cheating going on. It normally is a series of unwise decisions. A series where you look back and was it immoral? Was it totally wrong to like sit and begin talking and bearing your heart a little bit because it was a hard day to this person? Well, you're not breaking any laws and you're not doing anything like immoral. but was it wise? Because all of a sudden you begin forming an emotional attachment to this person, and you're married or they're married. And you have committed to be in a relationship where you are emotionally going to connect with your wife, your spouse, your husband, not with this person. And so what started with an unwise choice led to another unwise choice. Well, what happened again? And all of a sudden you're talking and you're staying late with that person, or you're talking at the car with that person, or you're thinking about that person more than the other, and you're allowing your mind to be undisciplined. You're allowing your mind to break promises you've made with this person for this person, just in your mind. Well, that's okay. And it just starts with a series of unwise choices. Is it are those things breaking laws? No, but they're a series of unwise choices. And the Bible teaches us to have wisdom. And what starts here leads here. And in that area of infidelity, of that's my friend, we have to recognize and honor what the Bible teaches us in Genesis, in Matthew 19, in Ephesians chapter 5. It says, what God has joined, like the two become one flesh. And what God has joined, let no man separate. In Matthew 19 it says that. Even if our hearts want that. Our hearts are hard. Our hearts often want the wrong things. We want to put ourselves first. And we are being selfish, self-centered in those moments when we would break that up. That's a heavy question, but I wanted to be honest with it. Anything you would add?
I think that's good.
That's heavy. That's heavy. I think we have time for just one more. We'll just take 2 minutes on this one, and we'll begin worshiping and taking time to wrap our service up. But this is a good one I think that we can end on. It says, when single, how do you attract the healthy one that loves God? When single, how do you attract the healthy one? Like, if you ever had that feeling when you're single, or maybe you've been divorced and you're like, but how do I not make the same mistake? And how do I get someone in my life that actually loves the Lord? My first thing to you would be to challenge you with this. Do you really know what a godly man or a godly woman looks like? Have you set, do you have a target in your mind? Because so many times, we don't have a target in our mind. We're like, well, God will bring somebody, and I'll just know because it'll be passion. I'll just know in my gut. And so we don't really have a target except our passions. And what are our passions and our emotions like? They're up and down all the time, right? And so we don't have a target. When you don't have a target, you hit it every time. And if you do have a target, what is your target? What does a godly man look like? What does a godly woman look like? And when we can start getting that right, so that's why you need friendships. That's why you need to have friendships with people who are different, and look into people you respect, and have mentors that have marriages that you respect. Because that's helping prepare you for the type of person God has for you, the type of person you want to have in your life. And then are you becoming the kind of healthy person that someone else who loves the Lord would be attracted to? Or are you dropping your faith at the drop of a hat? Are you just making compromises like that? I'll come back to faith in a few years. This person's worth it. I'll be able to help change them. And what happens is you end up lowering your standards, or you make your life as such, you want this, but you're not willing to change that in your own life. So no wonder you're not able to connect with the person you want to be, because you haven't become who you were called to be. Does this make sense? So I really want to challenge and encourage those who are wanting a healthy, godly person in their life to have a target. What is godly? Someone who prays, someone who knows the Lord, someone who walks with Jesus, someone who's willing to obey God even when it's hard. That's what you want. And be confident in who God has called you to be. That was one of the most attractive things to me with Sarah. She was so confident in who God had called her to be. She still has this smile that lights up a room. But when I first met her, I'd never known anybody like that. And she didn't need me. She just loved following Jesus. And I was like, at that point, I didn't know her whole story. But I was calling her back for another date to get to know her while we were surfing. I was calling her again because her character, who she was, shone through. That's what you want. And you're not going to find someone exactly like Sarah. It's going to be someone different. But if they follow Jesus and they love him, all of a sudden the trajectory of your life changes. You add anything?
I think just knowing that you're significant where you're at I think so much of the time we feel like we're insignificant without
You put the microphone up.
just knowing that you're significant where you're at. I think sometimes in our society, relationships are put up so high, but wherever you're at, you're significant and you're valued, and God has a good plan for you. And I think grabbing a hold of that makes you more confident, and knowing that that's a time that God has for you and Him to develop a good relationship.
Yeah.
George also talked, I think, at the first service about what kind of wake does a person leave. Like if you think of a boat, it has, it leaves a trail. What kind of wake does your life kind of leave a wake? Is it positive things? Is it negative things? What are they known for?
Yeah. You mind closing us with prayer? Thank you guys for being here today.
Lord, I thank you for each person in this room. I thank you that they each have a personal story and they're on a journey. I pray for the hearts that are really hurting. Relationships can be the best thing, and they also can be the hardest thing in life. And so I just pray that you really give each person wisdom for where their unique situation is. I pray that you give them vision for what could be, what you have for them. I pray that you would show those people how significant they are to you. You're a good God who has good things for us. You're a Father who wants the best for us. So I thank you that we can trust you with those things, with our spouses that we have, with our future spouses, with our past and with our future. Lord, I thank you that we can trust you. And so as we worship, I just pray that you would give us soft hearts, Lord, where we've built up walls, where we feel hard, where we've been attacked, where we feel critical, where we're angry. I pray that your love would melt those away, and that we would see you for who you are and for what you can be in our lives. So I thank you for every single person in this room. I thank you that they're here, and I just pray that you'd fill their mind and heart with vision for what you have their future to be, whether it be relationships, callings, whatever those might be. I thank you that you're our God, and I thank you that we can trust you. Fill us with joy and peace. In Jesus' name, amen.